I actually share a lot of that about going and making money at this. Interesting question. Which I have the pleasure here of slinging the last few slides. I promise you it's only 4, all right? So you can applaud now. For but no, this has been a terrific conference, and I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be able to say the last few formal words here. So people know that picture? What is it? Yes, the first IMP, yeah, the first Internet Message Processor, VPN, and the door was open networking. And I'll come back in, we're a little slow in this. So this is like I'm in the venture world now as a year ago from the technology side, and I really hate saying this, but I'm having a terrifically good time. It feeds a bit of my ADD. I go look at things like this and then off to solar plants and things, but it's stimulating. But this is at the core of what you look at, a pattern that you try to identify to sort of where, oh gosh, if I had only seen that, the IMP back then and understood its implications, how would it inform your investment strategy into the internet? But you see these sort of things that set up. These huge sort of existing global markets with fat margins and high intrinsic demand. Right? I mean, there's just a lot of money that gets made in networking. And you had the 1.6 billion TAM from in 2015 or something from Dell. I think kind of in some sense the whole market's up for grabs in terms of disruption of what could potentially happen. And these are vertically integrated, mature architectures, but the interfaces are open and accessible. I mean, that's sort of the thing that we've done here, right? Is we bump wires, and it's a whole other talk about how that actually has held back innovation, but it's something that we can all agree upon. And then there's lots of customer pain. Right? And one thing in operating expenses, one thing I've learned in that over the last year is you really make the most money. You make far more money selling people painkillers than vitamins, right? So you go after those, are at least legal. Right? So might alter things. Maybe this is my alter. And then you look. So what's the disruption? What comes underneath? Well, we've been seeing all of these things, and I won't repeat them. Other than say, actually, the merchant switch chips were early investors in Fulcrum, and thank you, Intel. But I wanted to also point out to the fourth one on here, which is this very cheap general purpose threads, right? Something, and it really sort of implicitly gets talked about here. I know, and Martine sort of just did a little bit about, well, you can't really build an effective router in x86. Yeah, maybe, but this sort of plethora of instructions that we're getting here, and one pattern that I've been seeing a lot of is being able to put sort of user-land general purpose computation and attached to threads on particular network streams, and sort of the insertion latency of that is pretty compatible with what time of flight and serialization and hop delays are through networks. So you can start to do things like video transcoding or network inverse proxies and caching, and it's really fascinating. And then much of this innovation cast as software. What does that mean to an investor? It means that it's capital efficient, right? And this doesn't mean sort of just that you can have your dog and your iPad and go do it. I mean that companies in software can be a lot of people to go make things happen. It's just that from a total investment cycle, you don't have to be putting a lot of capital in to go build the hardware out, so you get to do more of these, and it tends to be more efficient from the total capital point of view. And I'll also add to this area that it's right now this field, from a disruptive point of view, it's sort of delightfully well organized. I mean, the fact that this conference is here and we're all here representing people, and sort of we kind of feel that this is happening. It's a, you know, it's a testament to the vision of people behind it. But it's sort of like we have this place and we can have this conversation and understand, at least start to build a shared state of mind. Now, in the just to you know, full disclosure here, NEA was actually, as a long-term firm, made a lot of money being a very early and aggressive investor in Juniper. So that would be maybe one of those companies above the disruption line now. And so in the reinforcing that venture capitalist eat your young kind of view of the world, you know, where you go make money off of investments, and then the next round is going to go figure out how to disrupt them. This is you know, in trying to navigate this, because we're actually quite active now in investing, and to try to navigate this, really trying to organize our thoughts about, you know, where are the opportunities, where do you put them in. I share a lot of the, you know, the concerns about enterprise early on, but this is sort of a, you know, at the very high level, we think of it as, you know, sort of the planes, you know, in companies focusing and potentially having different focus in these planes, to layers, and that layer diagram is sort of a pun, right? Because obviously we're thinking about different layers when you look at SDN. I'll talk about that in a second. And then sort of the last piece is, so what's the market area? What are those pain points that you're wanting to go after, and what are the domains, and where do you first focus? So let me just say a couple of words about the layers on this side. What we really do separate out and try to think about what are those things that are really management stuff that's being done versus the control separation. And by that, and that's happened in general purpose computing. We've seen that over the years. In that sort of it's what are the, you know, when you talk about the pain points, you know, that I mean, was talking about at the a lot of those were in the management space. Certainly the, you know, these higher performance, I want to do quas or you know, a bunch of namespace tricks. That feels, you know, we would start to put labels on and control and data. And actually, so the applications, and this is where, you know, one wants to be careful. We haven't got our vocabulary here yet. The applications are actually data and control applications, right? They're the ones that sort of fit over that. The fact that we factored it is a hack, right? That's making it possible to do some really interesting innovations, but the value is delivered by coordinating that data and control. And in fact, and let me just say something a little contrarian here, just from a, you know, it's not actually contrarian, but if you think about, and I've seen this in a few companies, this logical extent, you know, management, you kind of feel like, yes, being centralized and centralized consoles and those decision making makes a lot of sense. In the control side, there is this nervousness about, you know, what's my vulnerability and how good do I have to be to make that high integrity. I've seen a couple of folks now that are really looking at, oh, well, the real important thing here was at the control plane, we got the consistent global state, and we learned how to propagate that around. That used to be sort of, you know, bad thing in networking, that you would actually be very deliberate about propagating that state around independently and telling people what you know. You could then fold that implementation back so that your data and control planes are actually back on the same box again. And but the control planes talk to each other in very rich ways. And I think that may happen. In the layers, we just sort of distinguish, we like hardware too, and distinguish, you know, sort of people who are working down at those lower layers, sort of the L2, L3, and then things above with applications and the like. And then in the actual domain areas here, you know, I will talk about, just talk about 4 of our investments that we've mapped into here. One of the anchor investments is Nicira, and you all know about that, and sort of in the service provider space. Very interesting one that's not, you know, open flow SDN per se, but follows this pattern is Aerohive Networks in sort of the Meraki and Aerohive, but in the Wi-Fi area, and they've done the separate off the data control and management planes for Wi-Fi, got the control plane to be very aggressive about understanding, you know, where you are a local Wi-Fi area and put the management plane up in the cloud. Right? And they did the folding back of the control on the data plane and do a very nice peer-to-peer sort of thing on that. There's Pluribus Networks, which is being sort of quiet now, so I won't talk about them. And there's oh yes, well, Embrain as well. So sort of enterprise-ish, maybe higher stack. But you look through and say, well, are you talking about data center, home? We didn't hear a lot about service provider infrastructure and things. And so this is a map, and we're being very aggressive about it, right? So I think this is a great conference for me, just to further organize some of these thoughts. And I want you to before I sort of end with, however, okay, and these are the things to think about, and it comes back to some of the things that Peter was talking about too. If when I think, and looking from the point of view of the computer guy in the, from the Sun vantage point, when we always looked at the networking and actually the storage industries and go, well, the thing that makes us different is that we actually start with developers, or developers are really high up in the rubric of what you think about in these companies. And all the really great franchises have a very strong developer component. Look at Microsoft, Apple, huge view on developers. That's not there and hasn't been there in the networking business. And I think for this stuff to really come together, the I will know success here, right? Or the success is coming when this conference starts talking about the developers a lot and the toolpaths a lot. I mean, that Jen's talk was the one that really spoke to me the most in that area. Because the really great application, we haven't seen yet. And I don't think anybody really talked about today, right? It hasn't been invented, and it's only going to get invented when you have these pathways. So I will conclude with, this is really a great conference. Right? And just a little plug, we write checks from $100,000 to $100 million, got $11 million under management. So, that's my email address. Thank you.